Hi folks, this is John Watson. I'm International Master John Watson. This is Ask the Master on ICC TV. The main idea of this show, by the way, you folks on the chat, let me go over to the chat so I can see, because this is a new sound setup. If you can't hear me, then if you can hear me, tell me yes, and we'll all be happy. And if not, I'll just keep monitoring the situation. All right. Okay. So what do we have here? We have I want to tell first-time viewers the way this works. You send questions to me. You can ask questions about anything about chess or the chess world. You can send these questions in advance. That's to an email, askimwatson@chessclub.com, which I will get to right away. I generally give priority to questions that are sent to me by email, because those have the advantage that they can be more carefully worded. And you can also send me games and actual positions and concrete moves, as well as a extensive question, which I can think about during the week. But we have a lot of fun on the chat. Most of our questions recently have been actually coming from the chat. By the way, let me go to the chat and ask how we're doing here. Stream looks good, good. And you can hear also? There we go. Okay, excellent. Let me scroll up, by the way, see if I've missed anything. We have so much to do tonight. A lot based on last week, actually, stuff I didn't get to. All right, so the other thing you can do is use the chat. If this is your first time on, it's on YouTube. You have to tune in. You have to allow the chat window up in YouTube, which means, I think, signing in, which is usually automatic with most people. And you can ask any sort of question. You can talk with the other people on the chat. Here are a few topics we tend to cover. The most popular is openings, about which I know quite a bit because I've written a lot of books about them and I've taught them and played them. Viewers can also send their own games, which can be a lot of fun. We've been showing more games recently, hopefully today, perhaps today. We'll show one more. It's interesting to talk about chess books and videos, chess history, chess improvement, chess strategy. Sometimes I get questions about leading players or tournaments that are going on. In fact, today I was thinking we might even get to a question about great players, the great players and what they are doing. I'm just checking it looks like I'm on there. Looks like I'm sort of visible anyway. All right, so that's a sort of general introduction. Let's get started, and you'll see how it works if you haven't done this before, if you haven't been on before. You can also watch all these games, all these lectures, shows. They're all archived on YouTube. And in fact, the opening topics that we cover, I put on my Facebook page, John L. Watson. So I will update those. They're a little bit out of date by 2 weeks now, but I'm going to update them after this show. Oh, and the new thing we're going to do is have a little article about this show, a little review of what we talked about. And the most important thing is I'm going to be adding a PGN file, or just include PGN games in the article, or probably both, about the games that I've shown. So, and I'm even going to include a few from last week, so you can see kind of how this works. I'm going to annotate the games and put them in a PGN file for you guys, and that way you don't have to take notes. And also they'll be a little more formal and more serious than probably what I say. I'm going to try to follow them fairly carefully, so they pretty much whatever I say here will appear in that file, but there will also be more detail, and that way I don't have to spend quite as long on individual games. Okay, I just got one from Jonathan. I hope he doesn't mind me saying that. He said since it was Halloween and it was the holiday, and 2 people played the Halloween Gambit against him, how do I recommend playing against the Halloween Gambit, which is the one you see in front, you're going to see in front of you on the board. And let me quickly run over to that board. Here we go. And that starts like this. And we talked about this once before, but I thought I would show something for black to play against it, and I would also maybe just talk about it. This is this crazy thing where you sacrifice a piece. Now, the reason this isn't played on a very high level is because because if black plays well, he's going to get the better game. I just tell you that right off the bat. It's fun for white, it's interesting, but black actually, if he plays really well, is going to get the better game. And top players don't mind playing speculative things, but if they're going to stand worse within just a few moves of the opening, as white especially, that's that's usually kind of unacceptable. So you'll see a sort of middle range player play this sometimes. And of course, the obvious thing is that it would be fun for blitz. This is probably more of a blitz opening than anything else, but it's also something you need to know how to play against as black. You could even run into it in a tournament by someone trying to surprise you. So I have a game up here. This is this Guzman Gariv game. Let me move my sheets out of the way here. And okay, this knight g6 move is sort of the officially considered best move. I'm not sure of that at all. I think knight c6 is just as good as knight g6. I think I prefer knight g6. Maybe it's a little simpler, but let's look at knight c6 for a second. Now the only way to increase the pressure here effectively is this move d5. The idea is if the knight goes back, you're going to be playing this move f4. And you just keep kicking the knight and you get a huge center and a big attack. And what I wanted to say about this position is that black can play this move if he wants a fairly safe game, which even probably gives him a small advantage. No, that's not right. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I want to do that in the move before. You can play that move there, but it's better. You can do this if you want to cop out and maybe just get a tiny advantage as black, but a practical thing. This is recommended in one book and another source that I was looking at. But frankly, the only thing wrong with this is you're kind of letting white off the hook because white's got just about equality. So if you want to refute the Halloween, this is maybe not the best thing to do. On the other hand, as a practical matter in a real game, you notice you're already ahead in development here, and you aren't even behind in material. Also, it's very forcing, although that means that white has trouble making a mistake. Pretty much if you look at this for a second, white better play this move. He needs to attack these pieces, he's also attacking g7. He's got to get some pieces out and protect against this threat, knight takes c3. So that's why this move is absolutely natural and normal. And then black plays here, threatening a discovered check and also protecting his bishop on b4. And white can do a couple different things here. If he takes this, it's actually a mistake. So this is maybe another reason to play this line, because you go check. There's nowhere else to go except here to stop the check. And then black can simply check again. Now it turns out this move also gives black an advantage, but this one probably gives him an even bigger advantage. Knight here, check. I won't show you knight d4. This will all these things will be in the notes that you'll be able to read in our PGN file. So now you save the rook and play check, and you can just see white's king is going to be too exposed here, because what black's going to do is castle queenside with check possibly, or at least with attack. So there's only really one good move here. A3 looks attractive at first as a possibility, but then this check is too strong. You just sort of bring all the pieces out. Check. Notice that's protected by the queen, so you can't take it. And there's just no way out, because if you stay on the file, the rook here comes here with check. If you move over, well, this is just an overwhelming attack. I don't know. Let me just show you this check, for example, which not only attacks this, but this king's getting more and more exposed. For example, after castles, you don't even take a piece or do anything like that. You just castle. And I'll let you look at this. This is just overwhelming because rook g8 is going to follow for one thing, protecting this bishop. And then you're on this one. Rook d1 is a big threat, followed by mating with moves like queen d2, bishop e6, and queen d2. So this is winning. So let me go back to the game. The other way to play knight c6 is just go ahead and let him advance. Excuse me. That would be d5. Oh yeah, here we go. So this is giving white all kinds of extra tempi, this position here, and now you just save your piece. You can actually still play here if you want to just safe game that's at least equal. Okay, because this is even material, but black has some threats actually. It turns out this is about equal if white plays correctly. You probably should play bishop d3. All these will be notes in the book. If you want to get more ambitious though, you can just retreat and say, what are you going to do to me? White, how are you going to win this game? And maybe the best thing white should do is just something very slow. Sometimes when you're a piece up, but it's not really all that sound, you don't want to force things too much because things will get too clarified. So I think the best way to do is go here and then castle and just hope that this big center is worth a piece or causes mistakes on your opponent's part, because the only thing that's actually been played in this position after this, let me see, after what have we got here? We've got white's move, is d6, and this has been played repeatedly, but I think it makes life easy for black. He takes, he gives his king an escape square against a check, and gets his queen out, attacks this, by the way, and attacks this twice. And there you can, it's not like you have to give up here, but here you can just, black can play king d8, but he can also just go there. And this is just an advantage for black because he's threatening to take this. So for example, if here you simply go check, he takes back, and you move the king over to stop that from winning a rook. And now you're ready to play a6. If he plays a move like this to try to stop a6, then that's kind of a good move because it means you can play a move like bishop a6. All you have to do is get rid of the knight now, and you're a piece ahead, and then you can take this pawn. So white can be fancy and take that because he wants to play bishop takes b6 check if you take it, but black simply takes here, and then if bishop b6 check, you can just move here, and you're just doing just fine. You're still a piece ahead. Okay, so that's basically what's going on there. Now, so that's knight c6. Now in this game he plays knight g6. White has to push up or else nothing's going on, and black can retreat. And now white has to stop d5 or try to stop d5 and aim for f7. He is a piece down, so he really has to make this move, bishop c4, or at least it's probably the best move. But now black can play two different things that are quite good. I mean, he can't even go kind of slowly, try to play like that. In the game he plays d5, sacrificing a pawn. We'll see that. It's also possible to just play d6 and attack the center, and it sets a little bit of a trap. Because if white plays f4, that's a terrible move, because you take it. If you take this way, the queens are going off. You can't afford that. Gets your piece down. And if you take that way, there's this very pretty move. Knight takes, pawn attacking the bishop. And if pawn takes, check. And then you take this bishop here. And you're still a piece up, and white's whole position has been wrecked. So that's a trick. White basically can't play f4. White has to play queen f3 is the best move, threatening checkmate. And then I think bishop e6 is good. Yeah, bishop e6 is a good move. You're still a piece ahead. And notice if he pushes, you have this capture on fork, winning yet another pawn too. White has to get as many pawns as he can. And in fact, that's probably the best move. Just get a pawn. And if bishop takes, you can play check. So black instead just stops that check. And the problem is that even though white's got two pawns for a piece, black's actually getting better developed here. And he's really just winning this position. I've got a little more in the file, but that's good enough. So this is very good for black. So you see, knight c6 as a whole is knight g6 is a pretty good move, and d6 is a pretty good move. And what he plays in the game is good too. He sacrifices a pawn back. Now if knight takes, you have bishop e6. That's very simple because white only has two pawns for a piece, and you're starting to get the initiative. So bishop takes is natural, and then black plays here. He could also just play knight e7, but this is good. Bishop comes back. And now black just opposes bishops and wins the light squares. Okay, so that's a little bit of a weakness, but white only has two pawns for the piece, and black's as well developed as white is, maybe better developed because this queen has influence. And furthermore, he's got a good bishop and white has a bad one. So two pawns is not enough for a piece. White tries this, apparently threatening here, but black answers very simply with that move. And he can also, by the way, just play, this is quite a good move here, with the idea of blocking the queen off with knight f5, because this is going to win an extra pawn here and just win the game. So white couldn't even take that pawn. So this is actually a better move, but it's okay. What he does is fine. He goes there. White tries to get rid of this pesky knight. Black castles, and oddly enough, white already resigns here, and that's because it's a correspondence game. And in correspondence game, by the way, I should check the chat and make sure nothing is going horribly wrong here. Let me just see what we've got here. It sounds okay. Okay, there's the announcement about the article. That's good. Super, okay. Okay, so this is the Halloween Gambit, and we're showing how to refute it. White actually resigned here because he's a piece down, white's ahead in development, and white's even got a bad bishop. White, in correspondence, you're just going to lose this game. It's just a matter of technique. Black's position is better, and well, by the way, the d-pawn's attacked. And the game was over. In a real game, of course, you'd play this out and try your best and see what you could do. Possible finish here, or follow-up here is to play. Let me just make this move here. Excuse me. Wrong screen. Here, and bishop up. And now maybe just, oh, whoops, got to protect that d-pawn. Bishop here, knight back. Attacking the bishop and the knight. I don't know if I have to go much further here, but it's very, very solid. And if black takes the bishop, he can also play knight here with tempo on the queen and put it on a nice square like that. All right, okay, so that's the Halloween Gambit for now, and let's see if we can get to something else that people asked about. That's how black should be. By the way, in practice, though, you know, in a blitz game, black's not going to play that well, and it could be actually kind of fun. The Halloween Gambit doesn't score that badly, at least in the blitz games. So, you know, it's worth maybe throwing in once in a while. If you try it a few times and you lose, you can always get your rating back to wherever it was by playing normal games. Okay, we have, let me see, what was the next thing I was going to look at? Oh, yeah, I was asked about a Greco game, and I didn't get to it, but I thought maybe I'd put up a Greco study. Let me get to my board here. Whoops, not good. Hang on. Okay, hang on. Let me, what is going on here? Give me a second. Oh, have I lost the board? Somehow I've lost the board. Is that even possible? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That is not good. Okay, give me a second. Let me get back on again. I may have to follow this again. Okay, let me show you this. Sorry, bit of a delay here. Why am I not able to do this? Maybe I need to expand this. No, that didn't work. Yeah, for some reason my window's disappearing here. The actual board window. One second, I'm sure I can fix this. Why am I not seeing my console? Let me just exit. Amazing. Close. Okay, I'm signing in. There it goes. I don't know what happened. Strange things always happen, don't they, folks? All right, so here we have, but I still don't have the console. So I'm going to have to move that over and miss the chat for a second. All right, let me put something up. This was the Greco thing I was talking about. And it's, I couldn't find a game yet. Well, I could have found a game, but I was doing other things, so I was going to wait till next week. But I did think about showing you this study that he did in 1623. See if I can get that up there. There it is. I hope you guys can see that. And the question is, there's two passed pawns here, so it looks like white's just winning. It's black to move, and black tries to draw. So I'll give you just a second to look at that. The main thing is to see it, not really to solve it. But I did want to show you that even back in 1623, there were people doing funny things. Jeremy Silman thinks that Greco was the best player by far of the early modern era. He thinks he was ahead of his time a lot more than some of the other famous early players like Roy Lopez or Philidor or any of those people. He worships Greco and has shown a lot of his games. So I'll find one of those probably for next week. He thinks his contributions far outshine other people. But I thought this would be fun just to look at. It's a Greco study. I'll show you what the solution is. You check first. He comes back, you take it off. This would be an easy win with two passed pawns, except black has a really fun move here. Anybody see it? Not easy. It's, I didn't even put it on here. I'll make the move. It's that move. So does people begin to see the point here? That's the wrong color to win with a bishop and a rook pawn. But this pawn is pinned, so he can't push it beyond and save the pawn. So black can play bishop takes pawn next, and then all white has is a rook pawn. And if white takes, all he's got is a rook pawn. And that's an easy draw. When you have the wrong color, the square that's the opposite color of the bishop, that's always drawn. The king just can walk into the corner and just sit there because there's always a stalemate. Maybe I should show you that really fast. I don't know. This is kind of silly, but let me just go up there somewhere. Just for those of you who've never seen it. It looks like white should win, right? Look at all this material. So he walks up and gets close and makes some moves and maybe gets closer and you might think, okay, white can check, but then I go here. Now if white makes a slow move, that's stalemate. Or if white, I don't know, lets him back over again. The pawn, it doesn't help to move the pawns, is what it amounts to. Let me just do something like this. It's always going to be a stalemate. See, so we get in the corner, the pawn moves up, stalemate. So that's something to know, by the way, about that rook pawn with bishop. Sometimes I forget that there are people on the show that are just starting out, so that's a good ending to know. So this is a very pretty little draw here, because you get rid of the one non-rook pawn. So that's kind of cute. And let me go back to the chat now. I'm going to have to just flip back and forth. Okay, let's do a few chat things. I have a lot of ping. Someone said a game I want to show, and there's quite a few questions. Something happened to New York today. Oh, an attack. I didn't see that. Fake news. Alan, I hope you're making jokes. Okay, let me just continue here. No Hollywood goblins. Here we go. So we have the article, as Sandra was saying. I'm just scrolling down here. The Dark Knight climactic. Oh no. What are the biggest problems players have with their thought process? What to work on to alleviate? Patience and discipline. You just have to be more. Probably one of the things to do is to be systematic as you can. I always like to start out with checks, captures, and forcing moves. So you check all the big moves, because otherwise you can play an almost perfect game and then you just suddenly drop a piece, or you miss the fact that you could have won a piece and finish the game off, and then you lose the game anyway. So one of the first things that club players do is a couple times during the game, they just blunder. And those are avoidable by just making sure that right after your opponent makes his move, you want to check and see if you have anything very direct, like just a direct winning attack or some sort of checks or captures or something. Because if that wins, you don't have to worry about what your opponent's doing. Then you go ahead and consider what other move you might want to make. But just when you get to the move that you've decided to play, take an extra quick look at the board and make sure your opponent doesn't have any checks or captures or forcing moves. So that's very important. Just caution. I always recommend that. Then after that, you can practice by covering up positions in books, for example, and trying to guess what the next move is. If you put a clock on, it's even better. It's hard. Sometimes it's a little boring. But if you have a clock and you put a clock on and pretend you're in a tournament game and cover up moves with any kind of game, you can do it with a game from a database. You can do it with a great games collection or whatever. That's very good study. So as far as thinking, just practice. A lot of practice is usually best. Just getting used to figuring out how to think. The books that you can buy about improvement tend to not really help much, I think, in terms of, it's a very personal thing, how to think best. What order to think about things is actually, and what to look at and what not to look at. One of the main things that distinguishes good players from lower players, and I think everyone agrees with this, there have been a lot of studies, is the number of positions you know, the number of patterns you know, the number of typical moves that you know. That's supposed to be the absolutely critical difference between very top players and players on the next level. Now, I'm sure there's things like talent and other kinds of abilities that are involved, but that seems to be something that's true of all grandmasters, that they have just a huge data bank of types of positions. So the more experience you have playing positions, the more you'll know which moves to look for. Otherwise, you're looking at too much. You can be looking at too much or too little, but you just have to get used to that. What are the best books on opening theory in general? I don't know if there are that many general books on opening theory. They're encyclopedias, but that's not really the same thing. Actually, my Mastering the Opening series, it's 4 volumes, is about opening ideas a lot, although there's a lot of specifics too. It's not an encyclopedia. It's more about ideas and general characterizations of the openings. You might look at a lot of you might like volume 4 because it's fun, because it's got a lot of irregular openings, reversed openings, and a lot of philosophic discussion. So there I am pushing my own books. I'm trying to think about opening theory treated generally. I think most openings should be studied specifically. Just take them one at a time, find a good book on that opening, and play the opening and study it. Every time you have a game with it, even if you win, take a look at what theory says about it, take a look at what you might have played and what your opponent might have played. Okay. No, not quite the Bishop H3 to polish it off. Elliot, who is an international master and a terrific player, is referring to a famous game to Topalov Shirov where he played a much more subtle bishop h3, which is considered by some people the greatest move ever played. I don't know. Yeah, it's good enough. It's such a tough category, but I think it's a beautiful move. Okay, I saw Aronian play the black side in English with e5, knight c6, bishop c5, a6. Sure, you can always do that. I've seen a line where black plays h5 against g3. Seems dynamic and interesting. Please go over. Bit general. Now remember, you can always send me emails at Chess Philosophers, always either very specific and I can answer them immediately, or very, very general, and it's very hard to answer them. The key there is if you could send me an example, maybe I can even look up an Aronian game with that basic setup. But those are two different issues, the h5 against g3 and the bishop c5 line. It's seldom that you get both of those. At any rate, yeah, maybe I'll look at that also to show you next week if you don't send me something. But the best thing to do is ask IamWatson at chessclub.com. Just email me an example or a more specific question. Okay, what have we got here? Yeah, I've got an interview. All right, okay. So let me continue with the things I was going to do today because there's a lot of those and I'm always late. Okay, someone asked me about the Milner-Berry Gambit, sent me a question, and let me show you that. It's, okay. Okay, here we go. Here are the moves. Now the Milner-Berry Gambit is part of the French defense. That's the French defense. That's called the advanced variation. And black chips away at the center by attacking these squares. First he attacks the d pawn, and in this case that's all he attacks. Okay, so now we're attacking that several times. It is defended though, so white doesn't have to do anything yet. But he sort of undefends it. He has the queen no longer defending that square. But he's not really giving up a pawn, even though it looks like he is because of knight takes, and actually if black tries to win the piece back, he loses his queen with that check. That's check. So far that pawn's safe, but that bishop on d3 is a problem because pretty soon this pawn's going to be attacked for real, like right now. Now black is threatening to take, and if white takes and black takes, then there's no check. And so black just wins a critical central pawn. Well, white says, okay, I don't mind if you do that. I'm going to give you that pawn because I don't want to move my bishop again. And black takes. And white just develops. He's getting his pieces out as fast as possible. None of these pieces are developed, so the idea is to get a big attack. I used to play this when I was young as white. And in this case, black takes. The question is about black capturing there, which is a risky capture because you're getting way behind in development and you're losing more time to that move against the queen. But it is playable. It's because you've won two center pawns, and center pawns are really important. So the question was about this move. That was the question. This is actually the normal move. I used to play this as black. It turns out, ironically, that even though this is a wild position, this can often end in a draw. I won some games with it, but then all of a sudden I started drawing games, and so I switched my because I want to win as black, especially when people are giving up their pawns. So, but it's a fascinating position. But why give up the d pawn? Why not just protect it is the question. Well, what white does is he plays here. And this is getting kind of serious because the queen can't go too far away from queen c7. And white's got ideas, for example, of queen here and bishop up here. The pieces are coming up really fast. So the question was, what if I just take that and after check just move over? Now, this is interesting because I think it's a good question. You know, growing up with this opening, I knew that this was a very dangerous position for black. But you know, nowadays, because I play the French so much, my first instinct might be, good grief, two pawns and they're center pawns, and I'm going to have a real solid position. I'm going to be able to keep everything really tight, and I can probably win this game, you know, given enough time and care. But this is an exception to that kind of thing, just because white's coming out so fast and has so many concrete ideas. So in this game, in the analysis that was sent me, bishop e3 is played, which was the machine recommendation. And also the machine gives here, and back, and it just says equal. I won't go into too much detail there. You can also play g3 with the idea of playing that bishop f4 move I was talking about. And that just gets extremely complicated. I think black should play here, getting out of the way with tempo. And maybe it's just complicated. But what I used to play in this position, what everybody who knew the Milner-Berry would play, is this very nice move. because if this falls, then we're closer to the king, and we're going to win we're probably going to win a second pawn on e6. So the threat of queen takes f7 is really, really tough. Even if you could get the queens off, like maybe there, then the problem is this is a very strong endgame. You have two bishops. This is extremely weak. The bishops are very active, and the king is exposed. Even with the queens off the board, the king really shouldn't be in the center. You know, often we talk about the king being in the center for the endgame, but this is not an endgame. This king is still being harassed very seriously. So you really can't play knight f6. So g6 is the most obvious move. I think that's the one that I give here. And now you come back and you're attacking this again, and it's not as easy to defend. There's really weak dark squares now. So this was better than playing queen f3 right away. And what do I give here for black? F6. You're threatening bishop f4 now. If black played slowly, you'd play bishop f4, and the queen would have to move again, and white would play rook c1, and there'd be all kinds of mates and things. So, or maybe queen takes d5. Just for example, let me just make a stupid move. And you've got to be really careful here. If you make some move like this, then I suppose queen takes d5 is going to be extremely strong, almost checkmate. If he takes it, it is checkmate, right? So that kind of thing starts happening. The key to this thing is it's a very typical trade-off in chess. Solid center pawns, a good defense versus very active piece play. And in this case, because of the extra weaknesses, the piece play triumphs over the pawns. And they don't always do that. Often the pawns will triumph. The extra two pawns will triumph because there's no way to get through in the center. But here there is. You can always sacrifice to get through in a position like this, it turns out. So in this position, f6 is played so that e5 can be played. And it almost looks like it's working if black plays e5. But there's a very nice move now. Now, actually, this has been played in 2 games, and actually black managed to win. So it is possible to almost, you know, if black gets 1 or 2 moves in, he can chase this away, get his pieces out, and use his strong center and extra 2 pawns. But this beautiful move is very strong, threatening rook e8. And after takes, the queen is attacked and the rook is attacked. And I don't know how much more of this I did. Queen c5 is probably the best move. This is a complete kill. You can look at this in my notes. I'm going to have this in my notes. And I guess rook c1, right? Yeah, and then queen c5, right? So I guess he has to go here. And something here is going to mate very quickly, probably that one. All right, so very pretty, that little rook sacrifice. He probably should do something else. I won't go into any more detail, but that's the reason, queen h5, that this whole line I don't think is very good. Probably just very good for white, but you can't tell just looking at a position like this. It easily could have been better for black or okay for black if it wasn't for sort of concrete tactics. You don't know instantly, unless maybe you're one of the great players of all time, that this is going to be winning for white, if you haven't seen it before, if you haven't sort of examined it before. But it just happens in this position that it is just too many pieces out. Okay, so what happened in this game? Bishop e3 was the analysis, and black tried that. Rook c1 is one of white's big ideas. Rook c1, queen a4, bishop c5, all kinds of piece play. Black's tried other moves in this position. This position's come up pretty often, actually. So bishop e3, which is not the best move, has been played pretty often. Okay, now this move is played. Let me just see if that's true. Hang on. Yeah, this move is played. I guess because bishop takes a7 was actually an issue. And the viewer says maybe this is too difficult to defend after all. Actually, I still think it's a little hard to get through. Because, again, it's so solid. Once you get knight f6 in, this is a pretty solid position in the center. So it's not so easy to win this. I'm not sure if you can win this, but you've got enough compensation for 2 pawns for sure. I give that as the main line. And this is a good idea maybe. Even though that gets pinned, it's very handy to have the pawn on h6 anyway, sort of for future reference. You know, black goes here, and then maybe you can think about moving the rook. The other thing you could think about doing is h5 with the idea of knight g4 in some situations. But in this analysis, I'm just looking at bishop e7, rook there, that cuts off the king and gets a new piece into play. All of white's pieces are attacking. But on the other hand, okay, bishop c5. Let me just look at something here. I wanted to check something out here. I thought h5 was a possibility. Yeah, here, this is sort of interesting. This position, it's hard for black to get his pieces out, but it's hard for white to attack. So it's sort of somewhat balanced. I'm not positive that white's winning this position or anything. Now, in practice, it's very hard to defend. Go back to the chat for a second so you don't think I'm getting completely out of touch. Okay. Got a question about but when everything a big mess, I'm on my best. Okay, so you like complicated positions. Okay, knowing that, could you advise me in opening against d4? You want a big mess against d4. We can take other suggestions here. If you play the King's Indian in a certain way, you can usually get a big mess. You have to, now there are positional lines that aren't so messy, but you can usually find a line that's pretty messy. The Benoni I used to play, and it can give you all kinds of interesting, wild, messy games. I think those would be the two most obvious super active kind of lines. The minute you play d4, d5, if nothing else, you can run into, very dull London system or something like that. It's a little harder to create a lot of action with d4, d5, especially something where it's messy. Sometimes you can get activity, but it's not really all that messy. So I would suggest, offhand, I'd suggest either a King's Indian or a Benoni. Try the Benoni. Very few people play it, so that means very few people know it. That's a big advantage. Let me just keep running here. I'm trying to catch up from the last couple of weeks and all kinds of chats, questions we've had. I think there's some fun stuff here. So that was the Milner Berry. So black can defend that position, but it's pretty tough, and there is that problem with Queen h5. Okay, here's a game. I was asked about the dragon. Someone was asking about Queen a5 last week, and I sort of opined that, let me put this up here. This is another game. I sort of said I thought the Queen a5 lines were all bad these days. They faded away. And it seems like that's true, because when I looked up just some statistics, first of all, I only saw 14. Let me show you what I mean first. I should show the moves. Now, the order can be different in various orders, but this is the dragon, Sicilian, right? We all know that. I showed this last week also. And this is the so-called Yugoslav attack for white. And white can either castle without bishop c4 or play bishop c4. The Queen a5 lines come up after bishop c4. That's that move. And now black plays there, white castles, and the question was of opposite side castling, Queen a5. Okay, and now Queen a5. Why play Queen a5? Well, the traditional line I showed you last time was this, attacking here, and then maybe you swing the knight over here. And if white plays this move h4, very often black will play h5, the so-called Soltis variation. This is one way to play it. It's very, very popular. There are other ways to play. I think I mentioned last week there's this line with takes and b5. I'm sorry, I guess the rook's still over here, isn't it? No, actually, no. You can play it this way too, I think. Actually, no, I've forgotten. But so that's a line. And let me just see what I was going to say about this. Oh, yeah, the statistics of this thing were kind of interesting. Let me show you a different order, by the way. I wanted to show you a different order. In this position, he played King b1. Ooh. Oh, this didn't happen. Queen a5 happened. Anyway, okay, so instead of that, black played Queen a5. What's the idea? The idea is you're going to use this rook over here, which is actually a little more effective, and create a little room for your king, too. And also, once you bring that rook over, sometimes when white plays the attacking move, bishop h6, you can just slide back and preserve the most important piece on the board, which is that bishop. But anyway, I looked this up, and from this year, one of my databases had 1,300 dragons and only 14 games with Queen a5. And that was out of 650 Yugoslav attacks. So as I say, one of the more normal lines is to play, well, just for example, let me just show you bishop c4, yeah, bishop c4, bishop d7. h4, h5 happens quite a bit because that deters this move. If you play castles right away, a lot of times you'll find the people playing the Chinese dragon, which has to do with just blasting away over there. There's a few other points to putting the rook on b8, but that's the main point. So a lot of times it turns out that if you play that first, often the Chinese dragon is not as good or doesn't work as well. So this is the way things normally kind of go. Here, maybe here, rook c8, and then white can play bishop g5. That's the traditional move. White can play king b1, and white can play, what else? Bishop h6, I guess. So anyway, in this game, let's just take a look at this. That's sort of the normal move order. I just wanted to show you that. So in this game, white does castle, black does play queen a5, and black pushes the rook over, as I was trying to express. Now, king b1 is the third most popular move, but it's actually, I think, very good. It's very difficult. I like this move. Black really only has one plan here, which is to play here and then either play an exchange sacrifice with rook takes, or play knight c4, which is much more common first, and maybe you'll sacrifice the exchange later. So black plays knight e5, and white just starts attacking with h4. White plays knight up, and this position has occurred thousands of times, especially in the old days. People are not playing this anymore, as I pointed out, with only the 14 games out of the 1,300 dragons or something, mainly because of this. Well, in the king b1 lines, this is considered very strong. There are other ways for white to play this, but this is real trouble. If you're going to play after king b1, this is trouble for black. And just because it's so solid for white, but he's still attacking. Or maybe there isn't really a because, it's very concrete. That's the only way to keep up pressure on the queen side. And a very important line now is just this. It's quite solid. If black plays there, this rook is sort of sitting there alone, and this position turns out to be extremely good for white. Just blasting away in the center. So black really has to do something about this idea of knight d5. Maybe bishop takes in knight d5. So black plays here is probably the best move. And white just keeps attacking, and maybe black attacks over here. Anyway, this goes on for a while. It's all in my file. I'm going to have it in my PGN file. I think white is simply better in these positions, as it turns out, once you look at these. But maybe not as much better as he is in this game. So let's look at what happened in this game. In this game, he played g4, preparing h5, and not playing bishop d4. And other moves have been played, but this is the one that's played most often. This position arises by a bunch of different orders. And now this nice little move. It's a very cute little move. If black takes that pawn, then you have this move here. This is worth remembering. This is a theme you should know. And if the knight moves, then we take here. And you might think, well, maybe I can sacrifice a piece somehow, but that's been tried, but it's not good enough. Basically, white wins a piece, and black doesn't have enough for it. So black has to move the knight, but that maybe he doesn't mind that too much because this bishop is getting stronger now because it's unmasked and it's attacking that e5 pawn. But the problem is white now plays, let me see, white plays this move. He can also play knight d5 is sort of a key move, and that probably is better for white after knight d5, but it's very messy and complicated. So in this case, now knight d5 is really threatened. And so black sacrifices the exchange, it's considered best, and takes here. And then not that long ago, it turned out white figured out a way of playing this, but this person didn't know. This is a fairly recent game. In fact, Ward says, this is from Chess Publishing, he says, as we enter 2017, could we be about to see the revival of an old variation? That's queen a5. Ward used to play queen a5 and recommended it in his books. He says, well, okay, I wouldn't get your hopes up, but all the same, I'm always interested when I see strong players playing my favorite old variation. But the problem is at this point, white should play here, and I can't find a good answer to this whole system. White just plays here now. And you might think, okay, black's got a lot for the exchange here, especially if he wins this pawn and keeps his long diagonal open. This must be really nice. But this is a very nice move, attacking the rook and the bishop. Bishop has to take, and then the intermezzo move, attacking this bishop, which means the rook gets to the 7th rank. We're still threatening the knight on the bishop on d4, and this position is just better for white. Very hard for black to defend this endgame. So this didn't happen in this game, but I wanted to show you that. I don't really believe this whole line. So I guess I'm thinking there's a reason we don't see, even though we did see it in this game, that there's a reason. Now this one's okay because we've got an extra, there was no rook coming to the 7th rank. And so this is about an even position. I might stop here and let you play out the rest of it, except there's one cute thing. Okay, there's one cute thing I have to show you. Okay, so now black's equal. This is just okay. He has plenty of play for the exchange. Look at these pawns, extra pawns. And on the other hand, this king's still exposed, so it's kind of a trade-off. And what I want to show you is this cute little idea. There. Ah, it's right now. It turns out that white has this nice move, rook h8 check, and then queen h7, which is a very common theme because if you put a rook on the file now, that's a checkmate. The problem is there's not a rook coming to the file yet, so this is not an obvious move to make. It turns out there's no really good defense to f4 followed by rook over, or rook d1 or rook d2 followed by rook over. And I'll let you look at the notes to confirm that. So maybe I'll just stop there, because what happened was rook d4 instead, and the game was actually eventually, I think, won by black or drawn. Yeah, it was won by black. And you can play it over in the PGN file that I'm putting in with this week's, attached to this week's little article. Okay, so how are we doing in the chat? Let me go back to the chat. We've got all kinds of other stuff to show. Elliot, you're just getting too nostalgic. Okay, what do we got here? Oh, a lot of little notes. A lot of good players coming on. This is great. John Hartman, one of our stars. Elliot, John Thomas. I saw Aronian play. I'll try to address that chess philosopher later, but probably not in this show. Oh, the Chigorin, you can do that. The only problem is, John, with the Chigorin, well, one problem with the Chigorin, it's not really a big problem, but sometimes when we're talking about what to do against d4, and I was suggesting either the Benoni, which is this thing, and then if advance, you go there. Modern Benoni is fun. The Benko isn't that messy, really. It's interesting, but it's not maybe that messy, or at least all the variations aren't that messy. The one thing, this is called the Chigorin, which I actually wrote a book about. This would be a lot of fun. And people don't know it at all. So and Magnus Carlsen even used it. It can't be that bad. Morzevich used it a lot against the best players, even when they all knew he was going to play it. He used it consistently. So that was kind of interesting that he had that much faith in it. But what I was going to say is a little bit of a problem, which is you won't always see c4. You're going to see a lot of bishop f4s and knight f3s, and then you can't really play the Chigorin, whereas he might play c4 later anyway and still get a queen's gambit. But knight c6 doesn't make as much sense in a position like this, for example. It's not horrible. You can still play moves like bishop g4, but in general, I'm not thrilled with this position or this position. Neither one of them is. You can play them. You can fool around, and it might be worth it. But all I'm saying is you're not guaranteed getting a queen's gambit declined Chigorin. Okay, what else we got here? Good idea, though. What's the best line against the Dutch? Very general question. I'll try and address it next week. I'll show you a couple interesting lines. Hi, Elliot. Resistance is futile. Yes, that's right. Moving Dutchman knows about the Dutch. Hartman. Well, I don't know. I think you can handle the main line, John. There's various irregular ways of playing it. Of course, white's going to be somewhat better, but black always has funny things he can do. I am the guy who asked about this variation. Oh, yes, yes. You asked about something else, too, I think. Okay, not sure why my 7-year-old is constantly in trouble, even on ICC 15-minute games. Well, we've talked about time trouble before. It's just something you have to work your way out of. I think a 7-year-old really has trouble slowing down and thinking, not slowing down, but usually 7-year-olds have trouble slowing down, so you've got the opposite problem. But realizing the clock even exists is not always so easy. It's something to do with your family, because you also have an older child who has traditionally takes too much time to think about his moves. So this is Rich Gazarian. He's the father of Kurt Gazarian, who's a very promising junior. Very, very promising. Okay, what do we have here? Not quite the Tarzan Dragons of the 1980s. No. Although I think Queen A5 was extremely popular at that time, Elliot, and now it's just pretty much disappeared, and it seems like there's good reasons for it. Don't tell me. No, Knight F2, I was planning to answer. I'm not sure if I'll get to it today. So I will address it eventually, so hang on, Faust. It's going to be there. Watson Winslow. What happened in that game? Was that one of my Queenie 2 weird games in the Yugoslav? Too many drugs. Semi Moran, that's messy, but you got to get there, right? Yeah, definitely messy. 1-0. Oh, good. I won. Okay, Elliot. Now I'm willing to talk about it. Elliot beat me plenty of times, so it's always nice to see that I managed to get him a couple times. Okay, what do we have here? I don't even know. What am I doing? We're doing a game maybe, because I want to get to a game every week. There's the Elyekin's defense question. There's your knight f2 question, Fausto. I think I'm going to do a game, though, because I'm keep encouraging you guys to send games. You don't send very many. So I just got a new one. It's a game that was in the Banter Blitz. I don't know if you guys play in Banter Blitz, but what happens is GM is playing, and you go in and you challenge him, and it's on a 3-2 time control. So the nice thing is that Jonathan, who I think was 1400 during the game, beat David Smurden, who's a well-known GM who was rated 26 something or other, 2650 or something. He's called Aslan7788 on the show, and so he beat someone who was over 1250 points above him. So that's obviously a tribute to watching this show. It shows to the value of watching the show is very clear when you can start beating 2700 players, or roughly 2700 players. Of course, I'm kidding. But there is a trick in this game that you should know. So let me show you this if I can get to it. Let me show you a trick that comes up in this game that all of you should know. It's elementary, but it's worth seeing because it comes up in so many different openings. Okay, here we go. So let's get started here. This is Jonathan is white, and David Smurden, the Grandmaster, is black. Jonathan carefully plays a London kind of system. David Smurden plays one of these B6s, considered very safe, not very ambitious, but very safe. And Jonathan is also playing very safely. This is sort of your standard position. Bishop here, pawns here, bishop here, knight here. You can't play it against every single formation for black, but you can play it against most of them. Okay, so white plays there. The idea of that is that at some point black's going to be playing this move, knight, h5, and you want a place to sneak your bishop away to down here. Okay, so black takes, and this is very interesting. Black counterattacks and manages to keep white's king in the center for a while. It's an interesting move. If you wanted to avoid that, I actually like this move a lot. I like having this file. It's like the Caro-Kann exchange or something like that. I really like taking with the e-pawn. I think white's better in these positions, just for future reference. This move works out okay concretely. I think if black had played more slowly, maybe it wouldn't have mattered. Black played very quickly and ambitiously. Of course, it's a 3-2 game, to stop white from castling and to cover that square, that d3 square. And, you know, black could just play a move like this, but it gets very messy. White can't play a move like that because black can also bring his pieces into play really quickly. So, what white played, I think, was much more interesting. It was just forcing the knight in. Normally, this is very undesirable because not only can't white castle, but black has two bishops. The issue, though, is that after that move, attacking the bishop, it has no really good squares to go to except back, and it's quite vulnerable on that square. So this is a interesting position, and white played here. I don't know if that's the best move, but it's an interesting move. White could also play here, attacking that bishop, and sort of tying black down to that square also, and maybe playing moves like rook c1. And it's probably only equal, but it's worth thinking about. Okay, so now black plays that move, and that's a question mark move. I don't know if anybody sees why. That's a bad move. What black should do, by the way, is just come over here and use those lights. I'm not so sure that's such a good move because now black can use the light squares. White's having trouble getting castled, and if he tries to sneak out this way, then he's going to run into this move, attacking these two squares, so the bishop can't retreat, and also the knight can be chased back, and that's pretty nice for black, that kind of position, because he still has the two bishops and he's chasing white's pieces away. So maybe white would play, what would white play? I'm not sure what white would play, but I think black's just a little bit better here. He plays this move, which is not, instead of that, he plays this move, which is not a disaster, but it's probably not a very good move, because white could play this, well, I'll let you look at it for a second. Let me just continue for a move. Okay, then white plays here, saving the knight, and black plays here, and that really is a blunder. Why is that, everybody? Everybody might want to look at that. That's a terrible move. It's a move that you should know this position because it comes up in countless openings. It's a trick for white. It comes up in countless openings, so most of you probably see it. It says check, which hits the king and the bishop, and that means he wins a piece, and that's clearly going to just win the game. Let me show you. Of course, it's a 3-2 game, so it doesn't win it immediately. What I wanted to show you is if you'd done that last move here, then it's not quite as clear, because if you take that bishop he's taking here, now you're still a pawn up here with a much better position, but at least black's in the game. He's only one pawn down. So, but in the game, oh, now the knight isn't attacked on e5 anymore, so black really should castle quickly or play queen c8 or something, because going there allows check, winning a piece. And the good thing about this is Jonathan shows really good technique. Remember, he's playing a grandmaster, so the grandmaster just attacks like crazy. And who can play well? I can't play well in these three-minute games for sure. I'd probably lose this game, despite being a piece up. But white really keeps his head very well here. Congratulations, Jonathan, on this. Not just winning, but on playing this part of the game so well. So Smurden is just going crazy, just trying to blast through and hoping that somehow there'll be a checkmate or something. But this is actually very nice, because white's just made very solid moves. Now it looks like black's making a little bit of progress, on there, and maybe there's going to be an open file. But white's just in time. White attacks the knight, and now it turns out white's going to get in on the queen side too. So black needs to do something. There's also this idea of queen back and queen check, for example. So black tries that. Very logical, trying to play pawn takes pawn, maybe winning some material, or at least blasting through on the king side a little bit. And also threatening that. And Jonathan plays this great move, threatening rook down, or even rook c8, exchanging pieces. Black takes, very natural move. White takes, it's still protected by the rook. Black plays here, very logical, trying to play bishop takes check. And white calculates very well here and just gets rid of the rook. King moves, and he wins the queen. Why did he move the king? Because this is too easy. This position's too easy when the queens are off. I think that's why anyway. Well, actually, rook takes would be awfully good too. Oh, just take the rook, and there goes all the pressure on the file. There's no more pressure on the file, so white's just winning materially here. Well, at least that's one way to do it. So instead of that, black gives up his queen. That's because both of them probably have almost no time left. And the idea is a little bit of a trick. Okay, you've given up your queen here, but it's almost checkmate over here with bishop takes, knight g3, and maybe something like rook f1, rook h1 f1. But it doesn't work, because after the check, white can play that move, and now there's no tricks. This is just too slow, because for example, once you do that, you check first. But even if you didn't have that, bishop takes saves the king. There's no more mates. So anyway, I think just a couple more moves and somebody or other resigns or falls on time or something. One more idea is to play rook over here and try to checkmate. And he doesn't. Now you could just play rook c8, but he decides to give himself an escape square with no time left. That seems like a really good idea. One more threat of checkmate, but white checks. And white stops rook h8 and threatens all kinds of checkmates and wins. Very cute little game. I love it when the readers send games. Some of you will have learned that queen a4 check trick, and send me some more games. It's fun. We should do one of those every week, I think, if we can. Winning is usually a matter of technique, but how do you develop that skill except from playing? I think you just play. You calculate a lot. You figure out how to handle your time correctly. If it's really a matter of technique, then all you have to do is well, it depends what kind of technique, but a lot of the games people lose is just because they blunder. When they have a winning game, they actually are just fine if they hang on to their pieces and keep attacking, keep being aggressive and try to win more material. Usually when you're material up, that means you can win more material because the other person has to back down in front of exchanges and things like that. Okay, let me see what else we have here. I don't have a dragon in your database. Ah, do you have the moves? Oh, Elliot's skeptical whether I won. I don't know. I have a feeling was it a Queenie too, John? I think John actually sent me this game at one point. My memory is terrible, but I think I actually remember this game now. He doesn't remember. Elliot will find the game, humiliate you. Okay, what are we doing here? Next, we have plenty of time, right? Yeah, it's 4, but that's okay. Maybe one more. Okay, g5 in the 4 pawns. I remember somebody asked me about g5 in the 4 pawns. Oh, and there's the great players list. You guys, if you want to, send me over the week, send me your list of the top 10 players of all time and reasons if you want to. We're going to have a big debate about this. I've already gotten 2 lists. And so that's one of the things we're going to do. We're going to have one of these shows where we talk about the great players. And we don't really have to care about who's the actual greatest and all that, but we can talk about the players, their styles, why their careers were great, or why sometimes they had one maybe blemish on their career, or why one player might be better than another. I think it'd be really fun. Just talk about chess history a little bit would be a really fun idea. So that's askiamwatson@chessclub.com. I'll save that for next week. I guess the only one here that I can do quickly is because I haven't actually come up with a good answer. So that means I can do it quickly. It's Jonathan's question. Not Jonathan's, I'm sorry. It's Faustus's question about the knight d3, knight f2 in the King's Indian. I did find out some things about it. Let me just show it to you. I don't think I have a game. Let me check. No. So let me just show you what that is. Here's the King's Indian defense main line. We looked at this really briefly last week, and I just faked an answer. The question was, okay, you have to know something about that. This is the main line of the King's Indian, which is already beyond a lot of people here, but maybe not beyond everybody. This is the main line that's been played in tens of thousands of games. And by the way, we got a question about Rook E1 too, and I sort of looked that up. It's amazing how badly Rook E1 has done, even though it seems like a fairly logical move. The idea is to move the bishop back, although in one case White moved the bishop up, and that game was drawn. We'll talk about Rook E1 maybe next week. But he's asking about the traditional move knight E1, and Black plays, say, knight D7, and White plays knight D3, and Black plays F5, and White plays F3. And the issue was, what about playing knight F2? And I noticed in the chat, which I didn't notice last time, it was only after F4 that you're playing knight F2. So let's say he played F4 right now. More often, Black plays this first, but he usually plays F4 next anyway. If he plays F4 immediately, the question is, what about this move? And I looked this up. I also looked up knight F2 soon after knight F6. I tried to look at all the knight F2s. Now, one of the ideas of this knight F2 idea, according to Faustus, I guess it is, was to play this B4 followed by maybe A4 and then bishop A3 and C5. But the thing is, I can't find a single example with B4, and I think that's because, see, here's the problem. When you play knight F2, you're not going to be able to play C5 as fast because the knight was attacking there. Also, sometimes when Black takes here, you aren't attacking the E5 square either. So the knight is very aggressively placed on D3. So to move it back limits your possibilities some, as well as taking a tempo. And the question is, can you really get through on the queen side after this? Black's probably going to play normally. In most games, Black just played normally. Played here and then played, for example, Rook F7, Bishop F8, Rook G7, H5. When I looked this up, Black did extremely well. Now, I'm not sure, and that was in performance rating too. That wasn't just the higher rated player beating the lower rated player, although that was true a lot too. There weren't that many games though, hardly any games, and that kind of surprised me because knight F2 is a useful move. It's hard to believe it's that bad. Remember last week I suggested somehow I was thinking of Rook here, and then H5, and then put one knight here and one knight maybe even here. That knight would come by G8. That's a lot of arrows, by the way, but basically that knight would come this. Okay, so we'd play H5. This knight would go here. The rook would end up on the G file, and the other knight might even get to H6. And then we would just blast through. So even though White would have H3 and the queen and the bishop and the knight on that square, Black would still be able to blast through eventually. And the question is, well, why can't White win in the meantime in a position like this? Well, one thing is if he plays this right away, I suspect A5 is a pretty good move. I don't know that as a fact, but it seems to me A5 would be a pretty good move. If the pawn takes or advances, then the C5 square is a nice outpost. A3 can't be played because there's a pin on the file. So I think B4, I'm just guessing, probably wouldn't be the right move here. I'm not sure. You could play B4, but even then there's a question of what's going to happen next here. Let's say Black just plays normally and White goes here or something. I think that was the suggestion. And here White better play H3 pretty soon to stop G4. And let's just say Black plays kind of slowly here. Plays for Bishop F8. By the way, he's usually played that already. Bishop F8. Actually, here you got C5 in, so I'm not so sure. Actually, good for White. You don't even have to play Bishop A3. I didn't see a single game with the Bishop A3 plan. So let me not play Knight F6. I want to keep stopping that move. So let's say Black just plays here, and White plays here, and Black plays here. Now, is White really going to go this way? I mean, maybe. It's interesting. I guess this knight would go here to put an extra piece on that square. And then white would have to figure out how to enforce c5. He can't really bring the knight back because that's a waste of time and is allowing an early g4. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure how white would actually enforce the move c5, but he might be able to. Maybe a rook c1 and a knight b5, or maybe he can do a pawn sacrifice at some point. But my feeling about knight f2 is it's too hard for white to get this move c5 in. It's really difficult. And if a5 is a good move, then he can't even play b4 right away. He has to waste an extra move like that before he can get moves like this and bishop a3 in. Whatever the case, this is a possible plan, and it might not be bad. So I'm not saying this is a bad plan, but it is interesting that nobody seems to have played it. No good player, no player even above, I don't think even a master player did I find a game with this idea. It's an original idea. You know, because usually the bishop's over here somewhere, right? There's the bishop e3, f2 idea, or maybe on d2, just sort of connecting rooks, and maybe later going to some square like that for defense and attack. So it's an interesting idea to try and keep the knight down to stop g4 and then just break through with c5, but it hasn't appealed to good players, and I just tend to think that's why. It's just c5 is too hard to get in, and black can still break through eventually with g4. That's sort of my answer, but I'm not an expert, and I'm not sure. That's what Elliot says. You always get it in somehow. That's the g4 move he's talking about. Aha! Black will never attack, will never get g4. And yeah, you were saying that last week, Faust, and I'm just not sure if that's true. What about my plan of putting the rook on g7 and the pawn on g5? Let me go back there. Okay, let's do it right here. Let's say rook b1, I don't know, here or something. b4. Oh, that's right, rook f7 is supposed to already be played. You were talking about playing a4 and bishop a3, right? Oh, you have to play h3 because you got to stop g4. Bishop a3. Oh wait, black's move, rook g7, bishop a3. And I guess now a5 makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? To try and sort of break up. Now you can't play c5 because of a takes b4. So are we sure now white's going to get through here? And if white doesn't get through here, now I'm going to make a bad move for white. White should probably take and play for a5 is my guess. Do something like this. Probably a6 for the rook, maybe not. But anyway, let's say he plays something like that. Now let's test this theory about... at least we didn't get that move in. Unfortunately, here there's always this c5 move, which bothers people a lot. That's an issue. Might even win a pawn, because if he plays here, there's this problem with tempo. So maybe my plan of a5 was not very good. Let me make another move. Rook c1, queen c2. The thing is, I'm thinking if black gets b6 in, it might be even worse, because then he can follow up with knight f6, and maybe king over, knight back, and then the bishop's on g4. So black will have a knight on h6, a knight on f6, that's 2 pieces. A pawn on h5, that's 3. Rook on g7 is 4, and a bishop on c8, that's 5. So Faustus is saying you can't get through, but white's defenders are going to be at most, what, 1, 2, 3, okay, 4, and maybe the queen has to stay here, which is a bad sign for the queenside attack. And then what happens maybe is you just get an attack where black plays g4, white ends up with a pawn here, but then the queen comes to h4. And you're not only on g4 again, but you're attacking like crazy against the king. That's sort of a standard. I don't know, Ellie, do you agree with that? That's kind of the basic kind of format, why black always gets through. So I'm agreeing with Elliot for the moment, Faustus. You'd have to bishop a3 is not necessary, but you told me that was the plan. Okay, but even if you don't play bishop, okay, you can play queen d1, but as I say, then black sacrifices a pawn and puts his queen on h4. Do you see that idea? That's a very, very powerful idea. So I'm kind of agreeing with Elliot that somehow that g4 move is going to happen, regardless. Now, okay, so there was a game. Here we go. He won with it. Wait a minute. Let me get a second. I didn't get this. Fatashnik played this. Yeah, I didn't see the Fatashnik game. Okay, interesting. So there was a good player that tried this. Interesting. Okay, so let's go back a little bit. Oh, we got a big debate here going on. Let me see. Checking. Sack 2 pieces. Oh, tremendous. Yeah, David Smerton's a great player. There is a game by Fatachnik with knight f2. He didn't get an advantage, though. I never got knight f2. You look this up. Stockfish gives the position as +6 for white. Well, that's true. Stockfish is always giving all these positions better for white, even when they're almost lost. They just doesn't have a big enough horizon to see how the sacrifices and the attack works. Yeah, that's absolutely true. The computers say white is winning, but he isn't at all. That's normal. Faust one. Okay, now we're discussing D3, G4 again. Hey, it looks like we're pretty much done here, aren't we? We're kind of late here. Rook A3. That was an interesting idea, the Rook A3 idea, to at least sort of defend on the third rank. But you know, as Elliot will tell you, that's been tried too, and it doesn't always work. Sometimes he just breaks through anyway. According to Stockfish, you first go A4, A5. Okay, that's probably true. That's probably a decent plan, but you have to organize A4, A5, and then you have to do something with it. Okay, because A5 is black is bad. Okay, that could be. I don't know for sure. A5 looked like it might be good in some positions, but I understand sometimes it's going to help white. So it's a delicate decision. In the positions we were looking at, I thought it looked like it might help black, but I don't know what Elliot thinks about that. Anyway, that's enough for that. That sort of sets the tone for that battle. Fausta, you can always look at specific lines and send me something. AskIamWatson@chessclub.com. That's the email address, ASKIM. What did I say? WATSON at chessclub.com. You can also send me on ICC a message, John L. Watson, JOHN, L as in lion, WATSON. And you can always come back onto the chat and have some fun talking to everybody else. So I appreciate everybody coming on. I hope it worked for a change technically. It looks like we did okay. And leave me out of this. I don't know, Elliot, you got to refute knight f2 now. We're counting on you for next week. So thank you, everybody, for being on the show. And I hope you can come again next week. And as I say, try and send me an email with questions and or games. Send me your games, anything like that, or just comments. The contest now is, I'll have to report the best answer or something. But I'll tell you about what people think the great players of history were, and maybe try to do it in order just for fun. Even though that may not be legitimate to compare over eras, it's fun. It's a fun list, and we can talk about what was good or bad about all these players, or what was slightly inferior about all these players. I have a couple lists already, but I'm going to wait to tell you about them. So send me a list, and yeah, we'll do an article tomorrow. I don't know if Sandra wants to give the link on that one more time. And I'll be giving you a PGN file with the details of what I talked about today, the games I talked about today. All right.